All right, everybody. I'm very honored and proud to have Alandra Markman on our stage. He is very much a survivor of the Montauk Project, or Project Phoenix. It's amazing to have him on our stage. You know, he, like so many others, has been through so much. So thank you, Alandra.
Thanks for having me. Hello, yes, I'm Alandra Markman. I'm named on the slide. Wow. I work today mostly as a deprogrammer, so I help survivors get free, get grounded, get deprogrammed, integrate alters, all that good stuff. And I teach meditation and help anyone get grounded, not just survivors. But being a survivor myself, it's especially meaningful for me to work with other survivors. So it's probably about half and half with my clientele. Half just people of all diverse types of experiences and half mind control survivors. Well, yeah, I'll give a brief introduction to myself during the presentation. I'm calling this Getting Grounded as a Trauma-Based Mind Control Survivor. Ta-da! This is a picture from Mount Shasta where I live. This is taken from Panther Meadows way up on Mount Shasta. Really nice sunset picture. And kind of a peaceful place to start. I like to use the word trauma-based mind control because it's inclusive of all the stuff that we've gone through, including satanic ritual abuse, secret space programs, timeline manipulation, etc., and on and on and on. There are many forms of related abuse, and they all rely on fragmenting people into DID systems, alter systems, and then getting those alters to do things independently of each other and unconsciously of each other quite often, and moving those alters into different bodies, using those alters for purposes that the host would find completely objectionable. So Penny gave a presentation on alters already, so I'm not going to focus on that too much. If you're comfortable, do those survivors in the room, if you feel comfortable, feel free to raise your hands. Just want to see. Hello. Hi. Hi. Okay. 3 out of 14. Okay. Well, for those non-survivors here, this can also hopefully help you understand how to help survivors. And I think a lot of this applies to anybody. The sort of stuff I'm going to talk about could help anybody get grounded, regardless of your life circumstances. So I hope this will be a benefit for allies and friends and the whole community. I'll just give a little intro to myself. My story is very complex. I've done about 30 interviews at this point, and I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface. So I thought I would just introduce myself. A lot of y'all are reading ahead of me, that's fine. I was initially born as a guy named Max McPeak and brought into Rainbow Bridge, which was Montauk, as most people have heard about it, in 1974. I had multiple age regressions in that context, and so my consciousness was moved to quite a few different places. The Zeta Reticulans faked my death in the 80s and brought me out of Montauk under those pretenses. However, that was only the beginning of the next phase of abuse, unfortunately, because I was moved into this body, where I was born as Alandre, into a bloodline Luciferian family, and it was intended that I would be a handler myself, that I would be a programmer. So most of my abuse in this body was geared towards making me into a programmer, making me work on others. And I became really, really good at it. This is part of why I work as a deprogrammer today, because I was trained to be a programmer, and I use that information for the opposite purpose from which it was intended. So that's part of my story in this body. But this body also has age regressions in multiple timelines. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to leave that out for now, because this is more about getting grounded. I got free from the cult and the programs in 2003, assisted by the Antarians. These are 8th density beings. These are my special friends. Oftentimes they appear like praying mantis beings. They're benevolent mantis beings. Sometimes they also appear as dog-headed humanoids. Speaking of dog men, Jessica's not here. She would love that. But yeah, mantids and dog people are generally the physical appearance of Ontarians, although they can take different forms because they're free from physical density. They were one of the main reasons that I got free. They helped orchestrate my escape. And I also had a walk-in into this body who calls herself Alandra. So that's why we wanted to add the Andra to our name to represent her and all walk together as an integrated being. Alandra is basically an ET as well from the area of Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia Gamma is the star where she's from. In 2017, we decided to change our name altogether to include everyone inside as a united council, so sometimes we refer to ourselves as the Council of Alandre, and to share our truth of interbeing. The label of interbeing actually came from the Sasquatch, so thanks, Sasquatch. Yeah, they're some really good friends of mine, and that's how they usually refer to me as an interbeing, so I took that from them, and I think it's an accurate label. So under the business name Ontarian Journeys, I've been helping other survivors heal since 2018. It's been really good. I have a lot of business. There are a lot of survivors, and they basically have very few places to go. You know, there are a few of us public survivors like myself, to name a few others: Annika Lucas, Max Lowen, Misha Johnston, who was here last year. She does hypnotherapy. It's pretty much other survivors who are providing these critical services, because the mainstream therapy profession, or the lamestream therapy profession, they don't get training to deal with trauma-based mind control. It's just not part of their education, which is deeply unfortunate. But of course, there's a mass conspiracy, so stuff like that is going to be very hard to teach in an institutional context. Anyway, this is me in a nutshell. So I had this huge journey, and now I help people with their huge journeys, and that's where I'm coming from. The first one is continued abuse or program service in the present. We don't even know that we're still in the programs. It's often unconscious. That's extremely difficult if you're trying to go in and heal past trauma and get grounded, but every night when you go to sleep, you're getting abducted again and getting more trauma. That makes grounding really, really hard. Accompanying that are memory blocks, denial, and various kinds of self-disbelief. So often when we get these memories in the first place, we don't know what to do with them or how to categorize them. That can't be from this life. That must be from a past life or a parallel life. I have visions of myself on a spaceship, but oh, that must be my Palladian ship in a different dimension. And, you know, that's a more kind of, a little bit more socially acceptable thing to have happen. But sadly, a lot of these things that come back, a lot of these memories are from this body. Oh, this body was in a spaceship non-consensually. Well, that changes things. Another obvious thing that gets in the way of grounding are addictive patterns with substances, sex, food, work, etc. Pretty much anything that brings pleasure or numbs pain can become an addiction. So this is just universal. The most obvious ones would be alcohol and drugs. But I'm including these other more normal things because they also play into it. Basically, every program survivor that I've ever worked with has had some form of sex addiction. It just goes with being sex trafficked as a young person, and being in some very unhealthy attachment patterns, to say the least, when you're in the programs. You know, people are bonded through trauma, stress, fear. Positive bonds that are consciously chosen are almost unheard of in a program context. In a satanic context or a space program context, you don't really get to choose your own relationships. Even your relationship to your own body, you really don't get to choose very much about how you go about that relationship. So when we get free, or when we're still working to get free, most often we have these addictions. Another big obvious one, and part of the reason we're here, is media and cultural censorship. You know, it's very rare to find people who can even believe us, much less support us. So that makes grounding really hard. We are social beings. We want our reality to be shared with others. And this makes us very lonely. It puts us in our own space at those very moments when we should be connecting to people the most. Moments when we really need others to be healing with. Because of the censorship, it's very hard to find them. And unfortunately, our family, our friends, typically, like the vast majority of the time, are hostile to our healing process, if not active handlers themselves. So that makes grounding hard. If you're still in contact with people who are handling you, consciously or unconsciously, usually unconsciously, then we have the next bullet point, obvious mental and physical illnesses. So on the mental level, we're usually dealing at least with CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, if anybody doesn't know that one. DID, dissociative identity disorder, that's what they used to call MPD, multiple personality disorder. When you're split up into alters, it can be diagnosed, that's not funny, it can be diagnosed in this way. A whole bunch of other mental illnesses are also created intentionally by our cult handlers. I wanted to bring up personality disorders specifically are often created. Borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. These are extremely common in survivors. These are intentionally created disorders. Partly because these are organic reactions to trauma. And so what the cult and the space program people do is they weaponize those organic reactions and they give them more structure and they turn them against the person so that you wind up with this very deep, very complex personality disorder. It's very hard to unravel. On the physical level, we're also dealing with pretty typically autoimmune disorders. For instance, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. These are very common. When you've been age regressed, it's extremely hard on the body. And it creates these long-term chronic health issues, which make it very hard to get grounded again, because if you haven't noticed, our health system really sucks, especially for chronic issues. And then you have vaccine injuries, so-called, which everybody's going through, the entire culture. Then some other things, the more existential things, temporal displacement, age regressions, and progressions. This is very hard stuff to wrap our minds around. Most of us, we just have one birthday. and it's a place where we can ground. It's something we can safely identify with. For an age regression or progression survivor, it's very hard to ground in your own life story. You have memories that don't even fit in with your linear sense of your own life. That's very ungrounding. Okay, just gonna keep going to my bullet points. Spiritual bypassing or intellectual bypassing of emotion. Okay, this is another one that's a mass culture problem. It's not specific to survivors. But it's especially exaggerated in the case of survivors because if we're going to get into our feelings, they're overwhelming. It's very, very common for us as survivors to be in a pattern of feeling absolutely every little thing, being extremely hypersensitive, and usually maybe on the same day, feeling completely numb to everything, feeling no emotion. We have extreme relationships with our emotion. And we find ways to normalize that. Spiritual bypassing is one of the most obvious ways, like, oh, I don't feel my feelings, I just breathe into my spiritual practice, whatever it is. And that can keep us going for years without actually getting into our more difficult emotions, including shame, guilt, self-blame, martyr programming of various kinds. I'm not going to get into every specific thing because I just want to talk in general about grounding. But I think about these things every day, and I hope this will start also some more specific conversations. Lastly, on my bullet point list, I'm just putting material pressure, especially money and housing pressure. So when we get out of the programs, We are betrayed by our family. We usually have to disconnect from our family of origin. We usually have no resources. We're usually broke and basically on our own. And when you're on your own in this capitalist system, it's really, really hard. It's, when an entry-level job, as they still call it, does not provide actual sustenance for an adult person. So then you have normal wage slavery. But in addition to that, not only is our family hostile, but they're often attacking us and trying to steal from us. So we have outright theft, we have financial and legal attacks. I know many survivors who are bound up in various lawsuits for no real reason. It's basically just another form of attack from the cult. They have pretty much infinite resources for infinite lawyers, and they apply a lot of pressure to survivors. So it can be just very hard to ground just on a normal level, just to pay rent and such can be very hard. So I wanted to name that. On the positive side, what helps with grounding? The short answer is that anything that helps a non-survivor with grounding is probably going to help a survivor with grounding as well. So we are by no means in an exclusive category. That said, I'll go through some of the basic things that we think about, that I think about. The first one on my list is always a body-mind awareness practice. For example, meditation, yoga, breath work, martial arts, dance, sports, anything to reclaim the body, get in the body. All dissociation is based on leaving the body in some form, and all reassociation is based on getting back into the body. So we want to reassociate, not to disassociate, so the direction will be into the body. Please and thank you. Next is any sort of self-expression, journaling. I put journaling, drawing, singing, self-expression, and creativity of all kinds, whether it's related to the abuse or not. So some of this is going to be very helpful for getting to memories. I have a lot of different clients who like to paint pictures that have to do with their abuse, or they make extended journal entries, and they'll bring the journal entry into a session with me. So obviously, if it is related to the abuse, that's very, very helpful for integrating memories. At the same time, even when it's not related to the abuse, just having that channel open kind of makes you generally a more grounded person. It attracts more of your personality into your body. And again, a lot of our host core personality was pushed out of the body. So anything we can do to bring our core self, our host self in DID terms, the host personalities, well, has different meanings, but generally considered the organic personality of the body-mind. So your birth personality. We want to bring that in, and we want to dissolve all the false aspects of personality. So self-expression is very useful for that. Next is obvious, but also kind of elusive, getting into healthy routines with sleep, food, exercise, workflow, etc. We were raised to be slave drivers to ourselves. When we get free, we're usually still in a slave mentality, and we're expecting ourselves to perform under absurdly difficult circumstances, just like we did when we were growing up, or on the other timelines, or last night when we were abducted. So it can be really hard to bring into our daily life routine here on Earth, good sleep rhythm, good food rhythm, exercise, workflow. I mean, add anything you like to that list to get yourself into a healthy routine with is always grounding. Another obvious one is to work regularly with healers, therapists, shamans, and other healers that understand trauma. I wanted to include they don't have to understand trauma-based mind control specifically. It does help, but if they understand trauma, they understand trauma. I mean, anybody who's trauma-informed will have the capacity to be at least a little bit helpful to you as a survivor. Obviously, it's much, much better if they have the full mental picture and they know what trauma-based mind control is and how to work with it. But sadly, people who know about these things are still in a strong minority. I'll just give an example for myself. I had a lot of help from a craniosacral practitioner And this woman did magic with me. She helped me unload so much trauma. She usually had no awareness of what I was releasing. She had no personal context for it at all. But it was very, very helpful for me. It helped move a lot of stuff from my body. So I want to give that one example. I also went through a trauma treatment program at basically a domestic violence treatment center. A lot of ritual abuse falls under domestic violence. And that program was really useful to me. They still didn't understand ritual abuse, but I got what I could from it. Okay, other things. Cultivating healthy friendships, relationships, and community that feel nourishing and are not recreating toxic dynamics from the abuse. This can be hard. I mean, we all have to go through years and years of loneliness just as a necessary part of healing. We have to completely recalibrate our system to understand what is a green flag, what is a red flag, because it's all been mixed up very deep in our body-mind. I'll have another slide on that towards the end about relationships. But at first it can be really, really lonely, and it can feel like a healthy friendship is not even a possible thing. But it is possible. Non-survivor friends are especially helpful for this because they do things kind of unconsciously that we never learn to do as survivors. So it's very helpful to observe them, how they create bonds and build trust. Okay, also commitments, healthy commitments. For example, to work, career, and personal projects that feel nourishing and not like a new form of enslavement. This may include public disclosure work, but it does not have to. So if we go public, it's great. As far as I'm concerned, the more people that get up on this stage, the better. That's what I would like to see. But we're all in different circumstances, and we all have different personalities. And so your work as a free person may or may not have anything to do with trauma-based mind control. If you do no disclosure work at all, you're still healing as a survivor. Like, you're still doing your thing. It's all valid. So I just want to say that. If it feels like it's bringing you life and not pushing you away from life, I know all this stuff is so obvious, but it's just nice to put into words so we can start to ground it into our reality. And it's easy to overlook when we're dealing with such complex trauma, such complex reality. It's hard to remember all this basic stuff and to talk about it. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about how to identify with the trauma, speaking of whether it's part of your life as a social person, whether it's part of your public life or not. We all have to go through this identification issue. And we all have to kind of set boundaries for ourselves and decide what's right for us to identify with, what's right for us to talk about and think about. I just want to point out some real basic things. Over and under identification. So over-identifying would be the first one, normalizing or glorifying SSP service or privileged cult roles, treating the life up there as more real or important than this one. This is a really hard one because we put years and years, decades of our lives, our effort, our heart and soul into our service as a soldier, or sometimes in satanic cults as a high priest or a priestess. Like, this is serious training. This is no joke. So I don't want to overlook that at all. There's serious discipline and serious commitment involved in these roles that we were in. But it's no more or less real than this life as a free person on earth. So I just want to point that out. That's over-identifying. Under-identifying would be minimizing or avoiding the impact of your service on your life. For example, who I am up there has nothing to do with me here. Trying to go back to who you were before you were aware of the abuse. So whether you go public or not, you have to be honest about what's happening in your life. And unfortunately, our culture makes it very, very easy to just slip out of awareness of the abuse and act as if nothing happened. This is a really subtle trap that a lot of us have to go through as survivors. And we have to make a point of making time for this in our lives, even though it's horrifically painful. When we make time for that, we're being true to ourselves. We're enhancing our integrity. We're being honest. And that brings us more into the flow of life. So we want to avoid under-identification as much as over-identification. We all do both of these things to survive, and it's common to do them at the same time. This is part of the cognitive dissonance and mind control going on in the larger society. So society at large, for a moment, has us as a morbid fascination. Oh my God, this strange and frightening thing is happening. Or they ignore us completely. So either we're part of some freak show or we're invisible. Unfortunately, that's just how the culture is at this time, so it's important to be real about that. And as much as we can to avoid internalizing that extreme duality, and to just be our own people, and to be aware that just to survive, we're going to be over-identified with our trauma, and we're going to be under-identified with it, all of us. This is a normal part of the healing process, and we all go through waves where it's more or less important to whatever we're dealing with in our present life at this moment. A sign of healthy identification is to accept your traumatic experiences as an important part of your life story without them defining who you are today. So that last part is really important. It's not the only thing that you are. No identity is all of who we are, no matter how deep it is. And people, normal people do this all the time, over and under-identify with things. Like, some people are so identified with their career, they can't talk about anything else. They don't know how to actually invest in anything that's not work-related, for instance. That's just a common thing in our culture. It's especially important for us as survivors to not be defined by these things. The greater part of us is free from all of this. The greater part of us is well beyond anything that happens on this 3D level. I think all of us in this room are aware of that. We're aware of the strong importance of everything above the 3D, below the 3D. This is just one layer of infinite layers in the infinite plan of Goddess. So I think we all know that here, so I don't have to belabor that point. I want to talk just for a moment, and this can get a little triggering, so please take care of yourselves if you need to. Just talk a little bit about hostile alters, dissociative identity disorder systems. So this is an extreme form of over or under identification. This gets more personal for survivors. So we're just going to have a little bit of triggering material here, and then after this we're going to go back to kind of more general things. So within our alter system, some alters or aspects of us are still loyal to our abusers and will repeat propaganda or mind control as their own beliefs. These tend to bully other alters and may be introjects. That means they're internalized versions of perpetrators. So a lot of us have an inner version, like normal people, no one's normal per se, but non-survivors have introjects as well. When you can hear, for instance, your mother or your father, you can hear their opinion about little things, and you're not looking for their opinion, but it's in there, and you're hearing it. So the same thing happens in a more extreme way with trauma-based mind control survivors. We can have internalized versions of perpetrators, and they can say a lot of the same vicious things that they said during moments of horrific abuse, and so they can re-traumatize us from the inside. This is very problematic. Just something I wanted to name, because not all alters in our system are going to actually be us. Not all alters are created from the material of our own mind. Some are created from other material. It's very important to disidentify with those. So this is more complex, and if you're dealing with this sort of stuff, I would definitely want to do maybe a private session, or maybe you want to see another practitioner. It's very hard to work with on your own. More submissive alters, others, will do anything to hide and or forget the abuse, believing that their life still depends on that. Victimized alters are usually in a dialectic with cult-loyal alters. So We have internalized versions of perpetrators, we have internalized versions of ourselves as a victim, and these are kind of in a dialectic that can be very hard to break. I mean, realistically, if you're at the point of working this way, you're kind of already through the hardest part. You're on your way to healing already, so maybe I don't want to get too deep into this. But yeah, I can talk about that more with people if they're interested. I'm going to go to the next one. Yes. So I think it's important to use honest language, to use accurate language, and to be real about what's happening, which is dehumanization. It's easy to forget at a conference like this that we're talking about trauma so extreme, basically none of us can stay present for it emotionally. It's pretty much impossible. And that's part of how these things stay secret, because it's so hard to stay present with them. If we're honest about that, it helps us. Acknowledging that our basic human rights were not respected during our service helps us to integrate our experiences. It's crucial to define our own personal values and to differentiate them from the anti-human, sociopathic values of our perpetrators. So, this cannot be repeated enough. These abusers have an anti-human value system which can never be brought out into the open. As soon as it's out in the open, you can see and feel how ridiculous it is, how nobody would ever want to consciously avow such values. So the more we can bring these values out into the open, the more we can work with them and we can emphasize what we want. I mean, and we don't have to look hard for human values. They're expressed everywhere. Even a satanic institution like the United Nations has a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's great. It's something we should all be thinking about. I mean, obviously they don't live up to their own word, but the words are important. Like, the words that people use, the values that they say they hold, those are the values that we actually hold. And it's important to differentiate ourselves from those who are just paying lip service to them. Don't be afraid to use extreme language to describe extreme experiences. We are entitled to use direct terms, including enslavement, torture, human trafficking, gang stalking, humiliation, rape, ritual abuse, MK-Ultra, and more. Do you feel how the temperature in the room went up just slightly, just from using that language? Like, it makes things much more real, especially for non-survivors who don't have a context for these kinds of experiences. They're like, when you say secret space program, they're like, oh, okay, whoop, just goes right by. But if you say rape, oh, rape is bad, that's a serious thing. You actually get their attention. They start being actually present with you. So this is a very empowering tool to use as a survivor dealing with non-survivors. When you use the simpler and more graphic language, it really, really helps for people to understand what's actually going on in a trauma-based mind control context. When you act, speak, and think from your own common sense, it helps others do the same and moves us all towards a more love-based, humane culture. That should go without saying, but I'm saying it. Be mindful of language that whitewashes trauma and violence. For example, experimentation or time travel. We are human beings, not sci-fi characters. So anything you can do to humanize the experience, to communicate the experience to non-survivors, especially to loved ones, where you really want that support and that validation, it's important to use language that's going to land and that will communicate the seriousness of the trauma. So that's a nice thing to do for grounding, because if you just use, language that's going to make sense to other survivors, you're probably not going to get the sort of emotional support that you're looking for. You're not crazy. The abuse is crazy. This is a big theme in my work. I often like to say that I wave a "you're not crazy" wand. You're not crazy. You're not crazy. I can't say it enough. You, as the experiencer, are not the crazy thing. The crazy thing is the intensely organized abuse, the scale of the abuse. One of the most difficult tasks in healing trauma-based mind control is to recognize that the abuse actually happened. It is real, with memories or without. Even if you don't have conscious memories, you're going to have body memories. You're going to have indications that something is up. And that's basically, those are the breadcrumbs that we're following as survivors. This is how we get to a more full healing, by following those breadcrumbs. The existential and metaphysical nature of the abuse makes it difficult to address within consensus reality. I kind of said this already, but most people just have no conception that reality can be manipulated in such ways as these. Like, what? You were moved into a clone body? Hang on. It's easy to lose people that way. But it's important to be true to the experience because it does bring new spiritual potentials into the collective field. When we acknowledge these experiences in a grounded way, it brings new potentials alive for all human beings, not just for survivors, but for all of us. What is consciousness? If consciousness can be moved into a clone body, maybe it's not what we thought it was, etc., etc. And so this does kind of move into metaphysical conversations, which are hard enough for most people without trauma present. Billions of US dollars are spent on each SSP slave. The material resources of every country in the world are going into abuse, while resources for healing are scarce. To put it mildly, the cards are stacked against us. The distribution of resources is crazy. You're not crazy. This military-industrial complex and economic setup is crazy. That's the truly crazy thing. It's not you. So, just so you know, I'm going to say that over and over. The sheer scale of the abuse makes it difficult to have a grounded conversation about it. This is one version of too big to fail, which is what they said about the big satanic corporations. Oh, they can't go bankrupt. They're too integral to the mind control system. We have to prop them up and keep the mind control going. You all know this, so I don't really have to say it here. But it's nice, again, to state the obvious. Just wanted to have a brief word as an end note about personal connections, balanced personal connections. So, as I was saying, we are social beings. We want our reality validated. We want to share our experience with others. So we always want connections. Look for healthy connections, regardless of where they appear. Sometimes people who don't understand your story can be helpful and supportive anyway. Just like I was saying with therapists, there are some therapists who have no context for trauma-based mind control, but they're trauma-informed, and they might be able to help you with something. It's the same way with friends or acquaintances or work relationships. Any sort of healthy connection gets you grounded on this plane of reality, in this experience. By the same token, don't ignore toxic traits in others because they are conspiracy aware. Some people who do understand your story can be extremely bad influences. We all know it. We've got toxic people in this community. A lot of them are very obvious. This is a normal part of being a human being. It's really important to keep yourself healthy. Basically, this goes into the next one. It's ideal to find people, excuse me. It's ideal to find people who understand the abuse and are also emotionally healthy. But this will be rare. When you have to choose one over the other, choose what's healthy for you. Choose what's healthy for you. That's going to be the best thing to do. Above all else, become the friend you would most want to have. This draws those qualities into your life. Most of us are familiar with that spiritual principle. Embody that which you wish to see in the world. It really works for relationships. The more you become a safe person, the more you attract safe people, which is part of why it's so hard for survivors at first, because when we get out of the cults, get out of the programs, we are not safe people. And we are going to attract people that are not safe. That's a normal part of getting free. We have to move through that and better ourselves. And the more that we have the qualities that we're looking for in ourselves, the more we will have them in others. Yes. those are my slides, so I'm gonna wind up here pretty much. I'll be available for questions. I think there's a little bit of time. I know that, again, this is super basic, but we're just working with the time and working with a lot of non-survivors. I'm just going to display my information here. So this is Mount Shasta with a little bit of a weird filter. My business, again, is called Ontarian Journeys because I work with the 8th density Ontarian beings. They usually come through in my sessions to work with people, so it's Ontarian Journeys Coaching, OntarianJourneys.com. I host guided meditation and healing groups online and in Mount Shasta, California. Some of you were at my guided meditation yesterday on the solar stage, so that's basically what I do every week. You can drop in over Zoom, or you can always drop in if you happen to be in Northern California. And I do one-on-one sessions for deprogramming and or spiritual development. They're very, very closely related pursuits, so they flow together. If anybody wants to reach me or join a meditation group, you can just write to the email on the screen, alandra@riseup.net. Yeah, and thank you so very much.